You're fired. Clean out your locker and get out of my restaurant before I have security throw you out like the trash you are." Madison Pierce's voice echoed through the crowded dining room of Luminosa, Los Angeles's most exclusive restaurant. Her designer heels clicked against the marble floor as she stood over 22-year-old waitress Emma Chin, who was kneeling on the ground, desperately trying to clean up shattered plates and spilled lobster bisque. The entire restaurant froze. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused midway to every mouth. 60 of Los Angeles's wealthiest diners watched in stunned silence as Madison delivered her verdict with the kind of cold satisfaction usually reserved for executing enemies. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Pierce," Emma stammered, her hands shaking as she picked up broken porcelain. "The gentleman moved his chair right as I was serving, and I don't want excuses." Madison cut her off with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "I want you gone. You're an embarrassment to this establishment and a perfect example of why I should never have hired people like you in the first place. People like you." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Emma looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Mrs. Pierce, I need this job. My daughter." "Your daughter?" Madison laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that carried across the silent dining room. "That's not my problem. Maybe if you'd spent less time getting pregnant and more time developing actual skills, you wouldn't be begging for minimum wage jobs you can't even perform competently." Phones emerged from purses and jacket pockets. Cameras rolled. Social media was always hungry for drama, especially when it involved LA's elite behaving badly. What Madison didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that the quiet woman sitting alone at table 7, the one who'd been taking notes all evening, wasn't just another customer. She was the one person on Earth who could obliterate everything Madison Pierce had built over the past decade. Have you ever seen someone's cruelty cost them absolutely everything? Let's rewind 18 hours to understand how we got here. And if you've ever been mistreated by someone who thought they were better than you, someone who used their power to humiliate people who couldn't fight back, hit that subscribe button right now. Only bullies and entitled manipulators won't. Let's stand together against people like Madison Pierce. Madison Pierce had built Luminosa from nothing, or so she told everyone who would listen. 10 years ago, she'd been a struggling actress with fading looks and zero prospects. Then she met Gregory Pierce, a 72-year-old real estate mogul worth $400 million, at a charity auction in Beverly Hills. 6 months later they were married. 12 months after that, Madison convinced Gregory to invest $15 million in her dream restaurant. Luminosa opened to massive fanfare. Celebrity endorsements, Instagram influencers, food bloggers. Madison had orchestrated the perfect launch. Within 2 years, Luminosa had become the hottest reservation in Los Angeles. Celebrities flew in from New York just to eat there. Business deals worth millions were negotiated over Madison's signature truffle risotto. But Madison's success had a dark foundation built on the backs of employees she treated like disposable servants. The staff turnover at Luminosa was legendary in the LA restaurant scene. Waiters, chefs, busboys, they rarely lasted more than 3 months before Madison's cruelty drove them away. She screamed at servers who made minor mistakes. She docked pay for imaginary infractions. She created a culture of fear where employees were too terrified to speak up about wage theft, harassment, or the hostile work environment. "She's a monster," former sous chef Marcus Williams had posted on a restaurant industry forum 6 months earlier. "She treats her staff like slaves, pays below minimum wage, and fires anyone who dares to question her." The post was deleted within 24 hours. Madison's lawyers had seen to that. But the truth about Madison's character couldn't be hidden forever. It was simply waiting for the right moment to explode into public view. That moment arrived on a Tuesday evening in October when Emma Chin started her shift at Luminosa, desperately hoping this job would finally provide the stability her 4-year-old daughter needed. Emma had been working at Luminosa for exactly 2 weeks. She was a single mother, supporting her daughter Lily while taking online classes to finish her college degree. The job at Luminosa paid barely above minimum wage, but it was steady work, and Emma needed every dollar. "Table 7 needs water," Madison snapped at Emma during the dinner rush. "And don't fill the glasses too high. We're not running a charity here. Water costs money." Emma nodded quickly and headed to the kitchen, her notebook filled with orders and special requests. She was carrying 6 different tables simultaneously, running between the kitchen and dining room with barely a moment to breathe. This was Madison's management style, deliberately understaffing the restaurant to maximize profits, then screaming at employees when they couldn't keep up with impossible demands. At table 7 sat a woman who'd made a reservation 3 weeks earlier under the name Sarah Martinez. She was in her mid-40s, dressed simply in a navy blazer and white blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She ate slowly, taking small bites of each dish, occasionally making notes in a leather-bound journal. Madison barely glanced at her. The woman wasn't a celebrity, wasn't dressed in designer clothes, wasn't accompanied by an entourage. In Madison's world, that meant she didn't matter. What Madison didn't know was that Sarah Martinez was actually Elena Vasquez, founder and CEO of Stellar Hospitality Group, the largest restaurant investment firm in North America. Elena's company owned 240 restaurants across 15 countries, generated $8 billion in annual revenue, and controlled the careers of every major chef and restaurateur in the industry. Elena also happened to be the silent majority investor in the building where Luminosa operated, a fact buried in corporate paperwork that Madison had never bothered to read. And Elena Vasquez had a very specific reason for visiting Luminosa that evening. She was conducting undercover evaluations of potential acquisition targets, restaurants with strong brands but poor management that could be transformed under new leadership. Luminosa had been on her radar for 6 months. But Elena didn't just evaluate food quality and profit margins. She evaluated character, leadership, and how owners treated their employees. Throughout the evening, Elena watched Madison with growing disgust. She watched Madison snap at a young busboy for refilling bread baskets too slowly. She watched Madison publicly humiliate a hostess for seating guests at the wrong table. She watched Madison deliberately withhold tips from servers, claiming they needed to earn the gratuity that customers had already paid. Each incident was carefully documented in Elena's leather journal. Each cruel interaction was noted with precise detail. Then came the incident with Emma Chin. Emma was carrying a heavy tray loaded with 4 entrees: lobster bisque, truffle risotto, grilled sea bass, and filet mignon. She approached table 12 carefully, her arms aching from the weight. As she began setting down the lobster bisque, the customer, a wealthy tech executive named Brandon Matthews, suddenly pushed his chair backward without looking, slamming directly into Emma's legs. The tray tilted. Emma tried desperately to catch it, but physics and momentum won. 4 plates crashed to the floor in an explosion of shattered porcelain, seafood, and sauce. The lobster bisque splashed across the white marble floor like a crime scene. The entire restaurant turned to look. Brandon Matthews barely glanced up from his phone. "Watch where you're going," he muttered as if Emma had caused the collision. But Emma didn't have time to respond because Madison was already storming across the dining room, her face twisted with rage. "What the hell did you just do?" Madison's voice carried across the entire restaurant. "Mrs. Pierce, I'm so sorry." The gentleman moved his chair in. "I don't want to hear excuses." Madison's voice grew louder. "Do you have any idea how much that food cost? How much this disruption is embarrassing my restaurant?" Emma knelt down, trying to clean up the mess with shaking hands. "I'll pay for it. I'll work extra shifts. Please, I'm so sorry." "You'll pay for it?" Madison laughed cruelly. "With what money? You can barely afford to feed yourself, let alone replace premium ingredients." Tears began streaming down Emma's face. The humiliation of being screamed at in front of 60 wealthy customers was overwhelming. At table 7, Elena Vasquez stopped eating. Her pen paused over her journal. She was watching Madison with the kind of focused attention a scientist gives to a particularly interesting bacteria sample. "You're fired," Madison announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Clean out your locker and get out of my restaurant before I have security throw you out like the trash you are." The cruelty in Madison's voice was unmistakable. This wasn't about the spilled food. This was about power, control, and putting someone beneath her in their place. "Please," Emma whispered, still kneeling in the puddle of bisque. "I need this job. My daughter is sick and I can't afford her medication without." "Your daughter?" Madison's voice dripped with contempt. "That's not my problem. Maybe if you'd spent less time getting pregnant and more time developing actual skills, you wouldn't be begging for minimum wage jobs you can't even perform competently." The words landed like physical blows. Several customers looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. This was Los Angeles. Nobody wanted to get involved in someone else's drama, especially not when it involved one of the city's most powerful restaurant owners. But Emma wasn't finished. "Mrs. Pierce, please, just one more chance. I promise I'll get out." Madison pointed toward the kitchen. "You have 5 minutes before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." Emma stood up slowly, her uniform soaked with seafood and sauce, her face wet with tears. She looked around the dining room desperately, hoping someone, anyone, would speak up on her behalf. Nobody did. The wealthy customers returned to their conversations and their expensive meals. The spectacle was over. The entertainment had concluded. Emma walked toward the kitchen with her head down, defeated and humiliated. Madison watched her go with satisfaction, then turned to the remaining staff. "Someone clean up this mess immediately. And the rest of you better take note. This is what happens when you fail to meet my standards." She smoothed her designer dress and returned to her position near the host's stand, greeting newly arrived customers with a warm smile as if nothing had happened. At table 7, Elena Vasquez closed her leather journal with a soft snap. She'd seen enough. "If you believe employees deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, tap that like button right now. Show Madison Pierce and people like her that cruelty has consequences." Only heartless bullies scroll past without engaging. The next morning, Madison woke up to discover that her life was about to implode in spectacular fashion. Her phone was buzzing frantically, 37 missed calls, 89 text messages, and hundreds of Instagram notifications. Something was very, very wrong. She opened Instagram and immediately saw the problem. The video of her firing Emma had gone viral. Absolutely, catastrophically viral. At LA Foodie Life had captured the entire incident from start to finish. Madison screaming at Emma, Emma kneeling in spilled food in tears, Madison's cruel comments about Emma's daughter. The video had been posted at 11:47 p.m. the previous night. In less than 9 hours, it had been viewed 4.8 million times. The comments section was a tsunami of outrage. "This is absolutely disgusting. How is this woman allowed to run a business? I've eaten at Luminosa 3 times. Never again. This is pure evil. Someone needs to shut this place down. Madison Pierce is a monster. That poor girl. My heart is breaking for her." The hashtag boycott Luminosa was trending number 3 nationwide, behind a presidential scandal and a celebrity breakup. Madison's hands shook as she scrolled through the comments. This couldn't be happening. This was just one employee, one minor incident. People would forget about it by next week. She was wrong. By noon, the story had been picked up by TMZ, Page 6, and the Los Angeles Times. By 3 p.m., it was the top story on CNN's website. By evening, Madison Pierce had become the most hated woman in America. But the real damage was happening behind the scenes in places Madison couldn't see yet. Elena Vasquez sat in her corner office at Stellar Hospitality Group headquarters in Manhattan, watching the viral video on her laptop for the 3rd time. Her executive team was assembled around the conference table: CFO Marcus Chin, COO Patricia Williams, and General Counsel David Rodriguez. "I was there," Elena said quietly, pausing the video on Madison's sneering face. "I watched this happen in real time. I watched 60 customers sit there and do nothing while this woman destroyed a young mother's dignity." Marcus pulled up financial reports on the main screen. "Luminosa operates in a building owned by one of our subsidiary holding companies. Technically we're their landlord, though they probably don't know that." Patricia added, "I've been reviewing their employee records and legal history. Luminosa has been involved in 14 wrongful termination lawsuits in the past 3 years. All settled out of court with NDAs. Madison has been systemically abusing her staff for years." David, the lawyer, leaned forward. "What are you thinking, Elena?" Elena closed her laptop with a sharp snap. "I'm thinking that Madison Pierce doesn't deserve to run a restaurant. I'm thinking she's built her empire on exploitation and cruelty. And I'm thinking it's time someone held her accountable." "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked. Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I want to take everything she has. Legally, systematically, completely." Within 24 hours, Elena had mobilized her entire organization against Madison Pierce and Luminosa. The first move was strategic and devastating. Stellar Hospitality Group owned the building where Luminosa operated through a subsidiary company called Pacific Property Holdings. Madison's lease was up for renewal in 60 days. Elena instructed her legal team to begin the non-renewal process immediately, citing breach of community standards and reputational damage to the building. The second move targeted Madison's suppliers. Luminosa sourced its premium ingredients from 7 major suppliers: seafood from Coastal Provisions, Wagyu beef from Premium Meats West, truffles from Gourmet Imports International. Every single one of those companies had either direct business relationships with Stellar Hospitality Group or aspired to. Elena made 7 phone calls. Each conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. "We're evaluating our supply chain partners," Elena explained to each supplier with quiet authority. "We're prioritizing companies that share our values regarding employee treatment and ethical business practices. I trust you'll make the right decision regarding your relationship with Luminosa." The message was crystal clear: continue supplying Madison Pierce and lose Stellar Hospitality's $8 billion in annual business. By Thursday morning, 6 of Luminosa's 7 major suppliers had canceled their contracts. The third move was the most elegant. Elena personally called 15 of the most influential food critics and restaurant reviewers in Los Angeles. She didn't ask them to write negative reviews. She simply shared information about Madison's pattern of employee abuse, the settled lawsuits, and the toxic workplace culture. "I thought you should know," Elena said to each critic. "Before you write your next review of Luminosa, you might want to investigate whether the restaurant's values align with your publication's standards." Within a week, 3 major restaurant reviewers had published scathing exposes on Luminosa's workplace culture. The Los Angeles Times ran a front-page investigation featuring interviews with 12 former employees who detailed years of wage theft, harassment, and abuse. Madison's empire was collapsing faster than she could comprehend. By Friday afternoon, Luminosa had lost 80% of its reservations. Celebrities were publicly canceling their bookings and posting about it on social media. Corporate clients were moving their business dinners to competitors. Madison's phone rang constantly with panicked calls from investors, partners, and her increasingly furious husband Gregory. "What the hell did you do?" Gregory shouted during one particularly heated conversation. "Do you have any idea how much money we're losing? How much this is damaging my reputation?" "It's just one viral video," Madison protested. "People will forget about it. They always do." "This isn't going away, Madison. I've had 3 business partners pull out of deals because they don't want to be associated with my wife, the woman who humiliates poor single mothers for entertainment." But Madison still didn't understand the full scope of what was happening. She still thought this was about public relations, about social media outrage that would blow over. She had no idea that Elena Vasquez was systematically dismantling every foundation that Luminosa was built on. Treat people with respect. If you're not siding with Madison Pierce, let her know that cruelty isn't acceptable just because you have money and power. Only entitled bullies stay silent. The first formal blow landed on Monday morning when Madison received a certified letter from Pacific Property Holdings. Notice of lease non-renewal, the document read. Due to conduct inconsistent with building community standards and significant reputational damage to the property, Pacific Property Holdings will not be renewing the lease for Luminosa Restaurant. Tenant has 60 days to vacate the premises. Madison stared at the letter in disbelief. This was impossible. She'd never even heard of Pacific Property Holdings. Her lease had always been managed by some anonymous property management company. "Gregory!" Madison screamed across their Malibu mansion. "Someone's trying to evict Luminosa." Gregory walked into her home office and took the letter without a word. He read it carefully, his face growing increasingly pale. "Do you know who Pacific Property Holdings is?" he asked quietly. "Some nobody property management company. I'll call our lawyers and—" "It's a subsidiary of Stellar Hospitality Group." Madison froze. Even she knew that name. Stellar Hospitality was the largest restaurant investment firm in the world. They controlled hundreds of properties, thousands of careers. "Why would Stellar Hospitality care about us?" Madison whispered. Gregory pulled up his laptop and began typing. Within minutes, he had his answer, and it made his blood run cold. "The CEO of Stellar Hospitality is Elena Vasquez," Gregory said slowly. "One of the most powerful people in the restaurant industry. She's known for 3 things: brilliant business strategy, absolute commitment to ethical workplace practices, and completely destroying people who abuse their employees. He turned the laptop toward Madison, showing her a Forbes profile of Elena. And according to the reservation records you showed me last week, Elena Vasquez dined at Luminosa last Tuesday night. Under a fake name. Table 7. Madison's face went completely white. Table 7. The quiet woman who'd been taking notes all evening. The one Madison had completely ignored because she wasn't famous or important looking. Oh God, Madison whispered. She was there. She saw everything. She didn't just see it, Gregory said coldly. She documented it. She evaluated you and your restaurant. And you failed spectacularly. The full scope of Madison's mistake was beginning to dawn on her. She hadn't just humiliated Emma in front of random customers. She'd humiliated Emma in front of the one person who had the power, resources, and motivation to destroy everything Madison had built. I'll apologize, Madison said desperately. I'll call her office, explain that I was having a bad day, that the pressure. It's too late for apologies, Gregory interrupted. Elena Vasquez doesn't deal in apologies. She deals in accountability. Over the next 2 weeks, Madison watched helplessly as her restaurant empire crumbled like a sandcastle in a tsunami. Luminosa's Yelp rating dropped from 4.8 stars to 1.2 stars as hundreds of former employees shared their stories of abuse. The LA Health Department suddenly scheduled a comprehensive inspection and found 17 code violations that resulted in a temporary closure. Madison's Instagram account, which had boasted 680,000 followers, lost 400,000 followers in 5 days. The remaining followers existed solely to leave hateful comments on every post. Her celebrity endorsement deals vanished overnight. The skincare company that had paid her $50,000 for one Instagram post dropped her with a public statement condemning her behavior. But the worst was yet to come. Gregory filed for divorce on a Wednesday afternoon, citing irreconcilable differences and irreparable reputational damage. The prenuptial agreement Madison had signed 10 years earlier, confident in her beauty and manipulation skills, now ensured she'd leave the marriage with almost nothing. Gregory kept their house, his business assets, and most of their joint investments. Madison would get a one-time payment of $200,000 and nothing more. You've destroyed everything, Gregory told her during their final conversation. My business relationships, my reputation, our financial future. All because you couldn't control your cruelty for one single evening. Madison sat in her lawyer's office, staring at the divorce papers, watching her entire life disintegrate. But Elena Vasquez still wasn't finished. Hit subscribe if you believe karma is real and people like Madison deserve to face consequences. Only heartless manipulators who side with bullies won't subscribe. Show where you stand. The press conference was held on a Tuesday morning at Stellar Hospitality Group's Los Angeles office. Elena Vasquez stood at a podium surrounded by cameras from every major news network. Good morning, Elena began, her voice calm and authoritative. I'm here to discuss Luminosa Restaurant, Madison Pierce, and the broader issue of workplace abuse in the hospitality industry. The room fell silent. Every reporter leaned forward, recording devices raised. 3 weeks ago, I dined at Luminosa under an assumed name as part of our company's standard evaluation process for potential acquisition targets. What I witnessed that evening was not an isolated incident. It was a perfect demonstration of systemic workplace abuse that has been allowed to continue unchecked for years. Elena pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. Employee testimonials, legal documents, financial records, everything meticulously organized. I watched Madison Pierce publicly humiliate and fire a young single mother named Emma Chen for an accident that wasn't even her fault. But my investigation revealed that Emma was just one of hundreds of employees who have been abused by Madison Pierce over the past decade. The presentation showed graphs documenting Luminosa's employee turnover rate, 340% annually, compared to the industry average of 70%. We found evidence of wage theft, discriminatory firing practices, harassment, and deliberate creation of a hostile work environment. Madison Pierce built her restaurant empire on the suffering of vulnerable workers who couldn't afford to fight back. Elena paused, letting the information sink in. Stellar Hospitality Group has a zero-tolerance policy for workplace abuse. We believe that restaurants should be built on excellence, not exploitation. Therefore, we have terminated Luminosa's lease, effective in 45 days. A reporter raised her hand. Ms. Vasquez, some critics say you're overreaching. That you're destroying someone's livelihood over one viral video. Elena's expression didn't change. This isn't about one video. This is about a documented pattern of abuse spanning 10 years. This is about hundreds of employees who were too afraid to speak up because they needed their jobs. This is about an industry that has allowed people like Madison Pierce to thrive by pretending we don't see the cruelty happening in our own restaurants. Another reporter spoke up. What message are you sending to other restaurant owners? The message is simple, Elena said firmly. Your character matters. How you treat your employees matters. Excellence in food means nothing if it's built on the foundation of human suffering. We will no longer tolerate, enable, or profit from workplace abuse in any form. The press conference went viral immediately. Within hours, #CharacterMatters was trending worldwide. Other major hospitality companies began following Stellar's lead, announcing new workplace protection policies and ethics reviews. Madison Pierce had accidentally triggered the most significant workplace rights movement in the restaurant industry's history. But for Madison herself, the reckoning was far from over. With her restaurant closed, her marriage ended, and her reputation destroyed, Madison found herself facing something she'd never experienced before: actual consequences for her actions. The $200,000 from her divorce settlement lasted exactly 4 months. Lawyers took half. She spent the rest on a desperate attempt to rebrand herself through a PR firm that ultimately dropped her as a client when the backlash became too intense. By month 5, Madison was working as a hostess at a mid-range chain restaurant in Burbank, making $15 an hour plus tips. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who had built an empire humiliating service workers was now a service worker herself, subject to the same pressures, the same customer cruelty, the same impossible demands she'd once inflicted on others. Table 6 needs water, her manager snapped one evening. And don't fill the glasses too high. Water costs money. Madison felt the echo of her own words and almost laughed at the cosmic justice of it all. But the universe wasn't finished teaching Madison Pierce about consequences. One Tuesday evening, 6 months after the viral incident, a familiar face walked into the chain restaurant where Madison was working. Emma Chin. Madison froze, her heart pounding. Emma looked different, confident, well-dressed, carrying herself with the kind of dignity Madison had once tried to crush. Emma approached the host's stand, and for a moment, the two women just stared at each other. "Hi," Emma said quietly. "Table for 1, please." Madison's hands shook as she grabbed a menu. "Right this way." She led Emma to a booth by the window, unable to make eye contact. "Your server will be right with you," Madison mumbled, turning to leave. "Madison." Emma's voice stopped her. "I want you to know something." Madison turned around slowly, expecting anger, expecting revenge, expecting the same cruelty she'd once delivered. But Emma's eyes held something different. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. "What you did to me was horrible," Emma said calmly. "You humiliated me in front of strangers. You fired me when I desperately needed that job. You made me feel worthless." Madison nodded, unable to speak. "But your cruelty also changed my life in ways you couldn't imagine," Emma continued. "After the video went viral, Elena Vasquez personally contacted me. She offered me a full scholarship to complete my degree in hospitality management. She gave me a job at one of Stellar Hospitality's restaurants with fair wages, benefits, and respect." Emma pulled out her phone and showed Madison a photo of a young girl, her daughter Lily, healthy and smiling. "My daughter got the medical treatment she needed. I graduated from college last month with honors. I'm being promoted to assistant manager next week." Emma's voice was steady. "You tried to destroy me, Madison. But all you did was reveal your own character while giving me an opportunity to build a better life." Tears were streaming down Madison's face now. "I'm sorry," Madison whispered. "I'm so sorry." Emma stood up. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came here to show you that kindness is stronger than cruelty. That character matters more than power. And that the people you tried to crush can still rise." She placed a $50 tip on the table, for a meal she hadn't eaten, and walked toward the exit. At the door, Emma paused and looked back. "I hope you learn what I learned, Madison. That every person deserves dignity. That service work isn't beneath anyone. And that how we treat people when we have power reveals who we really are." Then she was gone. Madison stood there in the empty restaurant, finally understanding the full weight of what she'd done and who she'd been. If you can't stand people who abuse their power like Madison Pierce did, comment, "Everyone deserves respect right now." Let's show that kindness and dignity matter more than wealth or status. Only bullies stay silent. 2 years after the viral video that destroyed her empire, Madison Pierce stood in front of a community center in South Los Angeles, reading from a prepared statement. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired but genuine, like someone who'd been through hell and finally understood why. "My name is Madison Pierce," she began, her voice shaking slightly. 2 years ago I became famous for being cruel, for humiliating a young mother, for abusing my power and treating employees like they were disposable. A small crowd had gathered, mostly former Luminosa employees, labor rights activists, and journalists covering the anniversary of the viral incident. "I can't undo what I did," Madison continued. "I can't take back the pain I caused Emma Chen and hundreds of other employees over the years. But I can tell you what I've learned." She looked directly at the cameras. "I learned that character isn't about what you do when people are watching. It's about how you treat people when you think there are no consequences. I learned that power reveals who we really are. And I learned that every single person, regardless of their job title or income level, deserves dignity and respect." Madison had spent the past 2 years working minimum wage jobs, volunteering with labor rights organizations, and speaking at community centers about workplace abuse. She'd lost everything: her restaurant, her wealth, her marriage, her reputation. But she'd gained something more valuable: an actual understanding of what it meant to be human. "Today, I'm announcing the launch of the Employee Dignity Project," Madison said, gesturing to the banner behind her. "A nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting service workers from the kind of abuse I once inflicted. We provide legal support, workplace training, and advocacy for employees facing hostile work environments." The funding for the project came from an unlikely source: Elena Vasquez. After watching Madison's genuine transformation over 2 years, Elena had made a quiet donation to help launch the initiative. Not because she'd forgiven Madison. Forgiveness had to be earned from the people Madison had directly harmed, but because Elena believed in accountability through action. "Some mistakes can't be undone," Madison said, echoing words Elena had once spoken. "But they can become catalysts for change if we're willing to do the hard work of transformation." Tap that like button if you believe people should face real consequences for their cruelty, but that transformation is possible when they do the work. Show that you stand for accountability and growth. Only manipulators who excuse bad behavior scroll past. 5 years after the incident, Elena Vasquez stood at a podium during a TED Talk in Los Angeles, telling the story that had changed the hospitality industry forever. "When I witnessed Madison Pierce humiliate Emma Chen that night at Luminosa, I made a choice," Elena explained to the audience of 2,000 people. "I chose to use my power to create accountability, not just for one person but for an entire industry." Behind her, statistics showed the measurable changes that had occurred. 87% of major restaurant chains had implemented stronger workplace protection policies. Employee retention in the hospitality industry had improved by 34%. Wage theft complaints had decreased by 52%. 3 states had passed new laws protecting service workers, directly inspired by the Luminosa case. But the real change wasn't legislative, Elena continued. It was cultural. We stopped pretending that workplace abuse was acceptable just because it happened behind kitchen doors. We stopped accepting that service workers should tolerate mistreatment as part of the job. Elena showed a photo of Emma Chen, now a successful restaurant manager at one of Stellar Hospitality's flagship locations. Emma didn't just survive her humiliation. She thrived. She completed her degree, built a career, and became an advocate for other service workers facing similar treatment. Then Elena showed a more recent photo: Madison Pierce volunteering at an employee rights workshop, teaching restaurant owners about creating respectful workplace cultures. And Madison Pierce didn't just face consequences. She accepted them, learned from them, and dedicated her life to repairing the damage she'd caused. That's what real accountability looks like. Elena's voice grew stronger as she reached her conclusion. The question I'm asked most often is, was it worth it? Worth destroying someone's business over one viral video? She paused, letting the question hang in the air. And my answer is always the same. This was never about one video. It was about hundreds of employees who suffered in silence. It was about an industry that enabled abuse. It was about proving that character matters just as much as capability. The audience rose in a standing ovation. The story of Madison Pierce, Emma Chin, and Elena Vasquez had become a case study in business schools, a reference point for workplace ethics, and a reminder that power without character is just another form of violence. Back in South Los Angeles, Emma Chin finished her shift as restaurant manager and drove home to her daughter Lily, now 9 years old and thriving. As Emma tucked Lily into bed that night, her daughter asked the question she'd asked 100 times before, "Mama, tell me again about how you became a manager." Emma smiled and began the story she'd perfected over the years. "Once upon a time, someone very powerful tried to make me feel small. She used her power to hurt me when I was vulnerable. But what she didn't know was that someone else was watching. Someone who believed that everyone deserves dignity." "Ms. Elena," Lily said, smiling at the familiar story. "Yes, baby." "Ms. Elena showed me that one person with power and principles can change everything. She showed me that standing up for what's right matters more than protecting what's comfortable." Emma kissed her daughter's forehead. "And she taught me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when they have power. It's what they do when they see someone else abusing theirs." As Lily drifted off to sleep, Emma sat by the window and thought about the journey that had brought her here. The humiliation at Luminosa had been the worst night of her life, but it had also been the catalyst for the best years of her life. She'd learned that character reveals itself under pressure, that justice sometimes comes from unexpected places, and that the people who tried to crush her had simply cleared the path for her to rise higher than she'd ever imagined. Have you ever seen someone's cruelty backfire so completely that it changed an entire industry? The story of Madison Pierce and Emma Chin teaches us that power without character is temporary, but dignity is permanent. It reminds us that how we treat people when we think nobody important is watching reveals exactly who we are. And it proves that accountability isn't just about punishment, it's about transformation, both for individuals and for entire systems. What would you have done if you were Elena Vasquez? How would you use your power to create change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice, accountability, and transformation moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for what's right, about karma catching up with cruel people, and about the power of dignity over cruelty. Because in the end, change happens when good people refuse to stay silent. When powerful people choose character over profit. And when the people who've been crushed refuse to stay down. Thank you for watching. At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next uncut voice that demands to be heard.